So this is one of my Canon FD vintage lenses. It's converted a little bit. It's got an EF mount on it now. It's got a follow focus gear, and so I can use it with a follow focus. But here's the problem with this lens. This is a modified lens. This is something that I had to put together myself to make it work for video use. And basically for my entire career, I've always wanted my own real Cinemalens. But that's not to say that this lens doesn't work great, but maybe it's time to get a real Cinemalens. So you're probably thinking that I've always talked about why you don't need real cinema lenses because they cost so much money. You can still get awesome optics from a lens like this, or maybe from a lens like this newer Sigma 24mm f1.4. Yes, you can use these modern DSLR lenses, but these are designed for autofocus, and so their focus throws aren't going to be as long. Like, that's a really short focus throw, and also this glass is really sharp and contrasty, and the fall off is going to be more crunchy, more sharp. It's designed for photos. It's designed to take your subject separated from the background, where like a cinema lens is really designed to have this really smooth, nice fall off to make it feel more like real life, more like, obviously, cinema. You don't want it to look like a photo. But see, the reason that I modified my Canon FD lenses was because they're cheaper, they're more affordable, they're small, lightweight, and cinema lenses cost a lot of money. I mean, even if you were just getting like an entry-level cinema lens, like a Zeiss CP2 or something like that, those are still going from like $3,000 to $5,000 a piece. You know, when I started doing this, Rokinon came out with some cinema lenses, but honestly, the glass on those, not great. They took some kind of cheaper versions of a DSLR lens and they modified it to make it work for video use. I never liked the image quality coming out of a Rokinon lens, so I just pushed those aside and I never used those. But now more and more companies are trying to make more affordable cinema lenses, and I've tried a couple of those out on the channel before. I've tried the SLR Magic APO Primes. Those are like $1,500, and I actually really liked those, but I wasn't quite sold on them yet. They were like changing. They made micro ones, they made the original ones, things were bouncing around, so I just didn't commit to that. But now things are getting a little bit more interesting. There's a couple more companies out there that are trying to make something more affordable. But the reality is, something's gotta give, right? Like, okay, take this Helios lens that I've talked about on the channel before. This is the Iron Glass Adapters modified, Cinema House modified Helios lens. So they took a fairly inexpensive lens and they put it into a cinema body, which is what I would, really that's what I would want to do with my Canon FDs at some point, but I got to find someone that's willing to make one for a little bit less expensive than the common ones, because it's like $4,000 to Cine house these, and I'm just not spending that kind of money right now. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. This is vintage and it's housed, and this thing costs $950. But one of these lenses, the Helios lens, you can find for like $50 on eBay. So that means that all of the engineering going into this costs a lot of money. So these companies that are coming out with these less expensive cinema lenses are going to have some sort of drawback. Something's got to give. If a lens costs $1,000, that means the optics are probably going to suffer. So that's why I've always been really weary about trying one of these new cinema lenses. But I've been really wanting a full set of cinema lenses for a long time now. And just as I was kind of giving up on this, a company reached out to me to test a new lens out, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to see if there really was going to be a better quality lens coming out on the market with a nice cinema housing and actually decent optics. And that's where this new Meike lens comes into play. So my first impressions of this lens are, it's really heavy, it's hefty, it's really well built, which is a super important part of the cinema housing. I don't want a cinema lens if it just has a cheap engineering, but then the optics are good. That's just kind of meeting in the middle again, just like my Canon FD lenses. So, this one has an EF mount on it, not a PL mount. Meike, asked to send this to me, and I said, you can send me the EF mount because I have all EF mount cameras right now. Something I kind of regret. I wish I would have got the PL version, because moving forward, we're probably going to get a cinema camera here at some point that has a PL mount on it, but that's okay. This one has EF. It can be adapted pretty easily. It does come in both versions. And the thing about this lens is that it's a full frame lens, which means it's future proof. It can fit on any camera I want to put it on. It's not going to be stuck in that super 35mm format. Actually, Meike started making micro 4/3 lenses, and then they made super 35mm lenses, and now they're making full frame lenses. So the build quality of this is really nice. It's got that nice cap that goes on the front of it rather than like a screw-on cap or a pinch cap like you would get on your DSLR lens. And then it's got really nice markings on it. I don't know if I would have gone with the red and yellow, but honestly, it's kind of growing on me now that I'm looking at it. Really nice buttery focus throw here. If I were to compare this to like the SLR Magic APO Prime, that one was like really stiff. It was kind of hard to use, and that would be kind of a problem when you're doing it yourself or if you're using it with a remote follow focus. This one's just really smooth and clean. It's nice. And then we've got obviously stepless aperture, which is nice. And then if we pop this open, you can see the iris blades in here. Look at that. There are so many blades in here that the bokeh probably is gonna stay pretty round throughout the aperture when we stop it down. Which maybe you think that, well, I don't really care about that, I shoot wide open anyways. Well, with cinema, if you're actually trying to shoot a short film or something like that, sometimes you actually want your full subject in focus, so you're gonna stop down the lens a little bit to get a little bit more of that depth of field. Not shallow depth of field, actual depth of field, which is really nice. And my concern about shooting with full frame lenses and maybe on a full frame camera is always like, well, if I don't want to shoot wide open, I'm gonna have to stop down, and then those aperture blades are gonna start to show in the bokeh. The background's not gonna look as pretty anymore, I'm gonna be bummed out. So the kind of perk of this is that it's a T2.1 and not like a super speed like a T1.3 or T1.5. So you're gonna have more of your subject in focus on a full frame camera. I wanna throw this on my camera and test it out, and it's not gonna be a full frame camera. I'm obviously using my Blackmagic Pocket 6K, so it's gonna be super 35mm, and we've got the 35mm here. They also make a 50mm already, and they're going to be coming out with a 25mm here pretty soon. So let's throw this on the camera and see how it performs. Let's see if something's gonna give, see if the optics are gonna perform because the body is so nice. My camera is kind of dusty, that's a bummer. It's getting used plenty. That's actually probably why it's dirty, not because it's been sitting around. Okay, so that mounted on there really nice and smooth. The EF mount on it seems to be working really nice. It's a pretty heavy lens, so something to keep that in mind. If you're putting it on a much smaller EF camera, it's going to have a lot of leverage and weight on the front of that body. So we can mount the follow focus here. See, look how long that throw is. And I mean, speaking of optics here, look at this rig. You know, when this little pocket camera is rigged out, it looks more like a full cinema camera. It's gonna impress your clients a lot more. I know that sounds silly, but it is true. And then when you put on a big lens like this, that's really gonna sell the whole effect. Well, this leads us into our first problem, which is ND filters. Now the exposure in here is pretty decent, but if I wanted to shoot towards the window at all, I'm definitely gonna need an ND filter, and I only use 77mm ND filters. This is something we need to figure out. So it turns out Scentsy does make a step down filter. So because the actual lens element is smaller than 77mm, a step down ring should work really well with this. My filter should cover up the actual optics, and we shouldn't run into any problems with coverage. So I'm gonna go ahead and order the step down ring, and once that comes in, we can actually test this lens in a higher lit environment. All right, so I was able to get a 82 to 77mm step down ring. Now, ideally speaking, we would be using a matte box, but for this, we're gonna just try this for now so we can actually get my moment variable ND filters to work on this lens. So we'll thread this on here. What's kind of nice about the step down ring like this is it just blends right in, and you don't have like one of those big protruding little filters, filter threads like I normally have on my Canon FD lenses. It just looks cleaner. All right, so I've got my moment variable ND filter here. It's a 77mm. We're gonna thread that on. The red kind of matches, and this looks really clean. This almost looks like it's supposed to be built into the lens. And it'll spin on there nice and smooth. This is a clean setup. Obviously, a matte box would have like an eyebrow on it. It would help block flares. But this is going to work perfectly for a couple tests with some real light in the room. Well, in a turn of events, I just got a call from my friend Corey, who wanted to test out the new Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro because he's thinking about buying one. He just bought an FX3 and he's undecided if he wants to keep it. Sorry, Sony guys. This guy is still pretty awesome and it's cheaper than the FX3. But anyways, he actually has a full set of Cooke cinema lenses. I believe they're the S4 minis or whatever. So in a little exchange to be able to use the Pocket Pro for a little bit, we're actually going to test the Meike here against his Cooke lenses and see how they perform against high-end lenses. Okay, before we get back to the Meike lens test, I want to talk about today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Now, I've been using Squarespace to build my website and update my website for like the last 10 years. And Squarespace is always great because I just use one of their pre-existing templates and I've just been updating that template as I've been going for the last 10 years. Putting my work on there. I've redesigned my website with it a couple times. I probably should redesign my website again, but I'm just too lazy. The work keeps coming in. Anyways, people contact me through Squarespace. I'm still getting work with my old stuff on there, but I should probably redo that website, kind of modernize it. And when it's really easy to do that, that's kind of what I love about Squarespace. But another thing I really like about Squarespace is that, a lot of times people are going to find you like on Instagram or something like that. They're going to be on their mobile device. They're going to want to go to your website to see what kind of work you have. And what's great about Squarespace is it's just going to automatically reformat the website for you for mobile. It's not you're not going to have to do some workaround to make it look good on mobile. Basically, if you just go to spencersakurai.com here, type in my name, look, the website looks good on mobile as it is, and you don't have to adjust anything, it just does it for you. So if you're anything like me and you need to put your work online, well, just do that with Squarespace. Click the link in the description to get 10% off, and I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, now back to the Meike tests. Okay, so some final thoughts on the lens. It definitely has some chromatic aberration, as you just saw in those tests. It's really not bad. I mean, all my Canon FD lenses also have chromatic aberration because those are old vintage lenses, and that's never been a problem for me. Unless I'm shooting directly into windows really zoomed in, you're not really going to notice that. So I don't really think it's going to be an issue for you. That's something that's going to happen with an affordable lens. It's not going to be perfect. That being said as well, this lens is not exactly tack sharp wide open. But let's just get something straight here. We don't really want that. That's actually what we were talking about with the Sigma lenses. Those are going to be sharp wide open, but it's not really what we're looking for in a modern cinema lens. We're looking for something soft and pretty with nice fall off, and this gives a lot of those characteristics. And right now I'm shooting on a 6K camera. we don't want a 6K image to be super sharp anyways, or it's not going to be actually that pleasant on our subject's skin. So having a somewhat soft lens, but with some nice fall off is actually what we're looking for. Actually, if you're looking at some of that Cooke footage, that was shot at 2K on an Alexa Classic, and it's not sharp at all, and it's a $7,300 lens. That Cooke lens is not sharp, it's soft. It just has a more pleasing look than a super sharp DSLR lens. So would I recommend this lens to anyone that's looking for an affordable cinema lens? Absolutely, I would recommend this lens. It's $998 and you're getting a whole bunch of lens for that price, and it comes in PL mount and EF mount, and I believe they're going to be making this in a bunch of other mounts too, so it's something to be looking forward to in the future. Right now they just have the 50 and the 35, but there is a pipeline of lenses that are coming out, the 25, 24, whatever it's going to be. It's coming out next, and I think they're even going to go wider and longer than that, so you can build a set as you go. Also, something to talk about is that they actually make a super 35mm version of this lens. I don't know if the optics are identical, but it's about half the price, so if you don't have a full frame camera, maybe look into that as well. So as always, guys, if you have not subscribed to the channel, definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, and give me a thumbs up on this video if you liked it. That goes a long way on the channel of getting more content like this made. And until next time, guys, I'm Sakurai. See ya.